All right, it's Alexander Lawrence, the Portable Infinite. I'm here today talking with Sean Curran. He's in this band called the how you say it? Stalwart
Stalwart Lovers.
Lovers, and it's been going. It's a super group, sort of, and but you can find. I'm going to put all the links in the description here. There's let's see. Oh yeah, if you want to check out more, it's the Stalwart Lovers on Instagram. There's a band camp that's pretty good. I was just listening to Faded and starwardlovers.com. It has a lot of info. And according to the band camp, it says the Stalwart Lovers are Sean Curran, who was in the Sickerthings, Nebtwister, Ricky Maymi from Brian Jonestown Massacre, and he's done a lot of different bands, and Justin Welch from Elastica and Jesus and Marychain and other bands and stuff. But before we talk about that, I want to go back a little bit. Like when we were talking, I was like, I thought you were like a Bay Area guy, but actually you're from the East Coast, you said, or how did you?
Yeah. Well, as a kid, I was born in New York, lived in Connecticut for a bit, and then we moved out here in '77 to Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And in August of '90, I moved to San Francisco.
Okay. August of '90.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of us, I mean, some of the other interviews, I grew up in San Francisco in North Beach in the '60s and the '70s, but I lived in Orange County and Long Beach, and a lot of us that a lot of people that moved up there in '89, '90 from Long Beach State, like we graduated and then we moved up there because we the music scene in LA was more like a hair metal thing, and then I had met Anton about '85, so he was more like the Orange County kind of Paisley underground guys, and
Yeah.
he was doing that one band.
Homeland.
Well, what was it? What was it?
I remember him saying he had a band called Homeland.
Yeah, Homeland and Electric Kool-Aid. He was part of that, and he was part of this scene around Safari Sam's in the mid '80s, and I met him and Nancy Gallo in the mid '80s. So I go up to San Francisco with my Long Beach, and then I'm walking down the street. I see Nancy Gallo at a bar. I go, "Oh, you moved up here?" And she goes, "Yeah, Anton moved up too. He followed me up here. We broke up, so they were both." Soon after, I think I moved like a week or two before the earthquake in '89, and then like maybe a few months later, Nancy and Anton had showed up, and and then I had the experiences of Anton like at the Horseshoe Gallery, and he's like going, I'm in 6 bands, and he's doing the air guitar, and he's going. I never went to. I know Jeff Davies lived on Waller, but I didn't get a sense of where Anton, if he lived anywhere or anything. I mean, my point being, a lot of us moved to San Francisco because there was kind of like an interesting kind of Paisley underground kind of scene going on, a psychedelic. I mean, there was like the usual bands like Metallica. I mean, Paul Kantner and some of the old hippies were still around, kind of hanging out. I mean,
Yeah.
it was kind of interesting. I mean, the bands I remember, like say '90, were like Bomb. I was roommates with this guy in this band Trunk that played a lot and toured around that time. I had met the Dwarves. They lived in San Francisco in like '90, '91. So there was and then your usual thing of like Carolina Rainbow and Crash Worship. Those are the bands that people went to go see like back then.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember Crash Worship. I remember I was friends with some guy. I don't remember the name of his band. Oh, Wire Train. Wire Train.
Yeah.
But the scene was like when I moved up, it was it was Primus, Metallica, Four Non Blondes was just starting. We shared a studio, we had a studio space right next door to them, so we'd hear them practicing all the time. But a lot of metal bands were still in the scene at the time. But it was kind of grim from where I was coming from because I was part of this sort of like post-punk pseudo goth scene down in Santa Barbara, LA. And when I got up here, it's like, what the fuck is going on in the city, man? And then things started changing a little bit. It's actually right around the time when I met Anton. There, Ride had started releasing stuff. My Bloody Valentine soon after had Loveless come out, and then stuff started really kind of changing in the city. I actually kind of put a lot on Anton and his idea for kind of creating a scene. But yeah, I mean, actually, I should probably reverse and talk about that meeting or something.
Well, I remember My Bloody Valentine played DNA about May '92. Were you at that gig or?
No, I saw them first at the Warfield. I think maybe Bob Mould opened up for them. That would have been 90. I think that would have been 92 or so, 93 maybe, right around then.
Okay.
Ricky would know. He's got a better memory than I do, but
yeah,
I definitely remember that.
Well, I do remember because I knew somebody that was touring with them, and I lived on 10th and Harrison at the time, and I was walking, and I go, oh, hey, what's up? This guy from LA. He's going, yeah, I'm touring. A roadie for My Bloody Valentine. And go, oh, I'll have to check that out. I remember when they played that one time. So let's see. So let's see. So like you had, when you moved to San Francisco, like you got an apartment pretty quickly there. You lived on that really prime block there where you had Groove Merchant Records and the Horseshoe and Don's Different Ducks. And
yeah, that was 1 year later when I moved to the city. I don't remember how I got it, but the apartment I moved into was at 818 Divisadero. So at that time, that was like super sketch. I remember the day I moved in, there was a drive-by right across the street. I was like, what am I doing here? But my roommates were all from Half Moon Bay. They got there first. I got this room that was about the size of my studio right now, like 8 by 8 feet with no window. And it was awful. And I remember maybe 6 months into it, they had a party, and this kid came up. He saw my guitars or something. He's like, "Oh, you play music?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm looking to start a band." He's like, "Oh, I play music too." I'm like, "Cool. How long have you been playing for?" He's like, "Oh, forever." And I'm like, "You're 16, bro." Like, anyway, it was Travis and Travis Threlkel, and
so he was around. He was
yeah.
So like, let me get clear. You were at Divisadero and around Fell, or where was that?
Divis in Fulton.
Fulton. Okay, yeah. I used to live on Baker and McAllister for like 3 years during the '90s. So that was your first place on Divis. Yeah, because like in '90, I remember because people didn't live in the Western Addition. It was like kind of a black neighborhood, and there was, even when I moved into 745 Baker, there was a black family that lived on the bottom floor. So it was kind of a black neighborhood. People would get mugged regularly in the 80s and early 90s. And so you were like a first adopter into the black experience there.
Yeah.
And
it was cool,
Well, that's where the cheap rents were. So you can get that's what people, because before that, I mean, people in the 70s and 80s would move to North Beach because of Art Institute or whatever. And then I think in the 80s that people were going to the Mission, but by 90 people were living in the Lower Haight and what they call the Western Addition. And so you were part of that migration back then.
Exactly. So about 9 months into that, I got a flat at 674 Haight Street with actually it was by myself initially. And my friend Tom, childhood friend, was moving up from Santa Barbara. So he had one room, a friend of his named Craig had another room, and then I had the best room because I got it first. And then the three of us lived there for, I guess, like, time goes by, so I don't remember, like maybe 8 months. And this guy Craig wasn't paying his rent. He was a little shitbag, and Tom kicked him out. And then I'm going to preface this into a meeting really quick and then go back to it. So Tom kicked this guy Craig out. So we were looking for a roommate. I had been recording some songs of my own and writing, and I was working at Horseshoe at the time for like a couple months. And I put my cassette in a demo of something that I had worked on, and just so I can hear it over the sound system in a place, kind of, anonymously. And this guy comes up to me with this wild look in his face. He goes, "Is it your band?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "It's not my band." He's like, "Oh, it's really cool. It sounds like Ant Also the Trees and some other stuff." I'm like, "Ant Also the Trees?" I'm like, "How the fuck do you know?" I'm like, "Okay, you got good taste in music, dude." So we were talking a bit, and it was Anton. He's like, "Yeah, I want to start a band." I'm like, "Cool." Like, so he invited himself over to my flat. Like an hour later, we recorded a song together. It's really cool, kind of goth song, whatever. And I could see, like, we were both very driven in our ideas and what we want to do. We both wanted to be front people and kind of in charge. And I knew it would not work out in that situation. So I was like, "Really cool working with you, dude. We'll see what happens." A couple of weeks go by. Tom comes up to me and goes, "Hey, I got a new roommate." I'm like, "Who?" He's like, "Anton." I'm like, "Cool." Like, we'll see how that works out. So it's Anton and Sally, and he moved in. It was cool. It's like, that guy's got an incredible amount of energy, and watching him just play guitar, and write songs over and over and over, and like I needed a real workout to keep up with that guy. Like, I had also worked at Guitar Center. I bought all this equipment, and I barely used it. Anton's borrowing it, and he's like got a fucking full album worth of shit within like 3 weeks, and he's recording it all himself. And I'm like, "Man, dude, like, this is cool." So anyway, that's how that process started. And then he walks up to me one day with a piece of paper. He's like, "I got a name for my band." I'm like, "Oh, cool. That's cool. You spelled Massacre wrong." But that's awesome, dude. Like, great. And then like 3 or 4 days later, he's got Travis in the band. This guy named Patrick, I think, was playing guitar. A guy named Dan was playing bass, maybe. And then he was using the HR-16 drum machine, and it was all going through our stereo system in the living room.
Well, how did you guys record back then? Like I'm kind of interested in that. Like, what did you have a 4-track
Yeah,
or?
Tascam. So all the early BJM stuff and the stuff I was doing pre Nebtwister and everything was a Tascam or Fostex. Tascam 424. And Anton would be a master on that fucking HR-16 drum machine. He's programming stuff all the time. So he'd do drums, I think a couple other instruments, then he'd bounce that, and then he'd start adding guitars. And I learned a lot from that process from him.
So, like on a Tascam, are you playing everything live, or are you just doing like the drums and the bass, and then you're recording the guitars and the vocals like over it?
Yeah, so both of us did the same thing. It was the drum machine first on, I think, in a 2-track stereo, and then we do maybe bass and a guitar track on the next 2 tracks, and then bounce that down, mix it, bounce it, and then add vocals and more guitars over that. So it was just layered. So by the time it was done, it was like 16 tracks, but it was 4 compacted renditions.
Okay. And so Travis was kind of like your main guy. He wasn't from Santa Barbara. You didn't know him. He was like one of the first guys you met in San Francisco there.
He was, yeah, out of that group of people, yeah.
And what was his whole deal? What was he doing? Like
He was in high school, like he was a kid. Like,
he's from the Bay Area.
Yeah, I believe so. He I just remember him being really young. So I was 20 when I met him. Travis was 16. And I didn't really see him that much, like I saw him 1 or 2 times before that. And then Ricky came in one day into the flat. He'd just gotten back from a trip from the UK. And he was also young, I think 17 maybe at the time. And that was when the stuff started kind of solidifying with Anton's group. So, you had Travis, he had Ricky, various other people would kind of come and go. I think Mervine from Enrique played drums a little bit briefly. And then sometime, and this all happened pretty quickly. I remember walking up on Upper Haight with, I think, Anton and Ricky maybe, and Anton saw a poster in a window of a basement apartment. I think it was a ride poster or something. And he's like, "Oh, I want to go check and see who lives there." And it was Matt Hollywood. I think that's when he kind of joined the band at that time too.
Yeah, Matt. If I remember right, Matt was working at Escape from New York Pizza back then, or was that?
Yeah, Yeah.
So let's see. Okay, so Ricky grew up in San Francisco. Travis grew up there. Matt was from Portland or somewhere up north.
He's from Ventura.
Oh, he is. Oh, okay, he's
Yeah.
from. Okay, so that's close to Santa Barbara. And so what were some of the other bands that like you were kind of in your circle there? You mentioned Orange. Was that because I want to talk about the tangible box a little bit. Like,
Yeah. So so right around the time where I'd met Anton, and decided we wouldn't work together, I saw a flyer, I think at Horseshoe, and it was Sonia from Orange looking for a bass player. So I auditioned, I got the part, I played bass for her for a while. And then she's like, "No, you're not good enough." And I'm like, "Okay, I get it." So she kicked me out, and then that's when I started Nebtwister. Um, and then later met Tim from the Rosemary's. We became best friends. So at that time, it was Rosemary's, Orange, Brian Jonestown Massacre. Like it was like us three was like kind of like the thing at the time. And then there was, some younger bands coming in. They changed their name so many times. It was like Obsidian, Your Precious You. They turned to Cinnamon. Then one of the, Eric Shea wound up forming Mover later on.
yeah,
Red were around at the time. Henry's Dress came a little bit later.
what about Broom and Panda? Was that kind of
Oh yeah,
was that the
yeah,
same time?
yeah, definitely. I think we did some shows with Panda, possibly at Club Boomerang. There was a lot. So back to this thing earlier when Dave Derazinski came on board. Um, Anton and he had this thing. It was Soundgasm. It was like they were doing events. Like Anton had these like awesome ideas about doing these like cool parties and having all these bands playing, and like there just wasn't enough bands to do it. But he would basically put on a Soundgasm presents at Club Boomerang, is like almost weekly, it seemed like, or whatever. That there was a place across the street, another small venue up there, but basically you go from venue to venue and it'd be Soundgasm type shows.
Right,
Peacock,
right.
another
Well,
one.
there was. I mean, back then there was Night Break, and
Yeah,
then there was Amoeba. Is there in the bowling alley? Was there where
right.
Amoeba is now? And then so across the street, that's where Boomerang was from.
Yeah. Yeah, so Boomerang used to be the Cadillac Lounge or something, and across the street from that, I think was Night Break. There was the I Beam was up there as well.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
a few other places. So Dave's involved. Travis is there. Ricky and Orange. Okay, so let's get to the tangible box. I mean, I asked Anton about that, and he kind of like gave me like a real crazy answer. I mean, because some of those bands like Orange and definitely Acid, I thought were like dumb names for bands because it's like it doesn't really stand out, and it's like okay. I mean, I think there was a band. I don't know, but I accused Anton of those were just like names he made up. But I guess, and he mentioned the Rosemary's too. Like he helped the Rosemary's get signed to a deal. I mean, what do you think about those comments? And do you remember when the tangible box kind of came? Because Nebtwister was on there too, right?
yeah. So we'll go back a little bit. So I remember, we were all looking to get signed. Like this is pre Nirvana. We all wanted to get a scene going in San Francisco like there was in the UK, and nobody gave a shit about any of us at the time. And you know, I remember for some reason Anton was really into Bomp Records. There was some band on Bomp that like really drew him to that label. So he called up Greg Shaw from our living room, and he basically, like, I was listening to the call, like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, hey, but he did it. Like he called, he's talking to Greg. At the end of the call, Greg had offered him a deal. Like, and I don't know the whole thing about the deal. I don't think he ever signed anything. I think it was something more of like, Anton said, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And Greg said, awesome, bring it. And that's kind of how the box set started. Um, so Anton put out, it was Nebtwister, Orange, a band called Hollow Body, Acid, which was a project of Anton's. There was, who else was on that? There was thought there was a Imaginary Friends on that.
Yeah, let me look.
Maybe not.
I was like looking at it the other day. So it's got Hollow Body, Orange, Nebtwister, Acid, Brian Jonestown, and Reverb. Is that?
Oh yeah, Reverb, Acid, and Brian Jonestown were all those were all Anton.
Okay, yeah, okay. So half of the bands are him. That's what I thought. It's like,
and it was brilliant. Like it was like, dude, a fucking box set with like half your stuff, and that like at the time I looked at it like whatever, but like it was cool. I mean, the Nebtwister stuff got mastered at the wrong speed somehow, and so it just makes me cringe when I hear it. But it was also, the songs were shitty too, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, but I mean, what I think, I mean, that was like his first kind of like, let's take a snapshot of this kind of made up scene that I'm in, and the Rosemaries were kind of involved, but
well, the Rosemaries were, they were in the scene, but it was they were on a different level. So like we were all a bunch of fucking idiots that didn't know how to play guitars, and like we were just making noise and trying to make something happen. The Rosemaries guys were all like legitimate, like really good players and had their shit down. They had a light show before anyone else. They had like everything was going on, like they were dialed in, and like they looked like a signed band when you go see them play. They was like super professional. They wound up getting signed to Interscope or something like that. And then it all fell apart. But they were on a different level. And they weren't really, we would all do shows together, but there was no real relation other than that. We were part of a scene, but there was no like, I don't think Anton was really involved with any of that.
And then there was the band, the Orthelias, were around. I mean, they were on Rough Trade Records. I mean, they were sort of like a Paisley Underground, kind of a Syd Barrett type band, but they existed like in the late 80s, early 90s. You didn't have any
I never heard of them.
Never heard of them. Okay. But getting back to some of the venue. Okay, so there was Nightbreak, Boomerang. One of the first Brian Jonestown shows was supposedly at the Peacock Lounge, and that was like, and it was part of a church. Is that right there? And you would have to rent it for like $100 or some.
Yeah.
And it was like I mean, that was what was so great about the Western Edition. I mean, a lot of it was these Black-owned Baptist churches and I mean, down here in LA, it would be like, do you still live in the Bay Area, or I don't even know where you're?
Yeah, I live in the East Bay.
Okay, so you're in these, yeah, down here it would be like some kind of Masonic temple or some kind of club where you give them $200 and they give you the keys, and you start up a punk rock show, and like whatever. But up there it was like these, like the John Coltrane Church and the Baptist Church, or just these weird spaces, and they would go, hey, we're gonna have a gig and stuff. And the Peacock Lounge was one of those places. I mean, there was Nikki's Barbecue. I mean, you mentioned some of these other places. I mean, you used to, I mean, and there was house parties too. People played just like house parties in the Haight and the Upper Haight.
I think initially the idea was, I think Anton was talking about doing like big type, like rave type things with bands, but the venues were just, they were too large for what was going on. So the Peacock Lounge was like the perfect place to do that kind of stuff. And I think it was the second show that was there. The first show was a house party on Haight Street. I think it was like semi outside, if I remember correct, like right up by where Spaghetti Western was, the restaurant. So like a couple doors up from Horseshoe. And then there's the Peacock Lounge, and then I think there were multiple events at the Peacock Lounge that just grew bigger every single time. It was pretty cool.
And I don't know if we do, like Matt Hollywood, like you talked. So you met him like walking up there, and like how did you know that he played, or what was your first impression of that guy?
Uh, let me tread carefully here. uh, I think from my recollection is Anton saw the Ride poster. He may have even seen, I think there was a Rickenbacker bass, a blue Rickenbacker bass. I kind of vaguely remember that in the back of my mind. And I think that's what got him to go knock on the door and talk to him. You know, some people just don't gel with other people as much as they try. And that's kind of my relationship with Matt, if there is any. There's also an age difference. I think I'm 4 or 5 years older than he is, and even at 24 years old, I had no tolerance for people a lot of the time. Which is another reason. A lot of times in the early days of Brian Jonestown, you'd have this turnover because these guys, they weren't writing the parts. Like Anton wrote the shit, and he knew what he wanted to play. He knew what it wanted to sound like. And then these kids would come in and they'd be like, I want to do it my way, dude. I'm better. And it's like, that's not what you're signing up for, So like they would quit or get fired. And then, a couple times he'd be like, hey, will you play bass or play guitar for me for the show? I'm like, yeah, not a problem. It's like, you have to have no ego, at least back then, working with people like Anton or me, because we know what we want. It's like, if you try to venture from that, it's not going to be good for you.
Yeah, I mean, and also Anton wanted he wanted the guys, he wanted, Vox amps, Vox guitars, like Rickenbackers, and he didn't want a guy come in with like an Ibanez or something, and like, no, it's not gonna happen,
Well, it sounds different too, It's a thing.
So like we all, I mean, back then we all listened to KUSF, and you mentioned KUSF on your notes here. I mean, I used to, stay up late and call up and get like free records and free shows all the time, and because I used to, especially like at this time we're talking about, like definitely like during '91, I lived on Divisadero and Hayes, and I used to stay up late and listen to the radio station call up. But like, what was your association with KUSF? What was going on there?
We they played great music, but more than that, like Anton and I wanted to hear our shit on KUSF. So like we would literally just record a song, each of our little projects, Brian Jonestown, my stuff. We'd go freaking walk up to KUSF, go hand off a tape to Germ, and then he'd either play it or he wouldn't play it, and most often he would. And it was just like, we're like, yeah, cool, we're on the radio,
Yeah, they used to play a lot of like because I was more, I used to send like one of the guys in the morning, I used to send them like my stories and they would read them on there and stuff, and they were it was real experimental and sort of, I guess that was like the hippie kind of overlap and stuff, and those guys were really I mean that they were it was a terrestrial rate before they sold it a few years ago.
Yeah.
So everyone could listen to it. And we had I mean, it was definitely like the station that everyone listened to in San Francisco because it was so odd, and I mean, it was kind of promoting the scene and everything. So okay, so we talked about that. So yeah, when did some of the we talked about Mara Cagle and Miranda Richards. When did they come into the scene? Like at what point?
So I'm gonna say right around 95 or so. I didn't know either of them at the time. So I had a recording studio down at Turco Persian Rug Factory, which was where it was a recording practice space. That's the place where we practiced Four Non Blondes, the Rosemaries. A lot of bands had it. It was down by Balboa Park BART station. So I had turned half of our practice space into a recording studio, and I remember. So I Anton wanted me to record him there. I don't know when it was. It was somewhere between 3 different albums. So it was Anton, Dean, I think Jeffy, Brian Glaze, and Miranda at that time. So, and Joel, and I recorded probably 8 songs at the time. And then nothing really happened. They wound up kind of steamrolling into another project. and I don't remember exactly when this was. So, because there was a time period where Anton was working at Compound with Not Human, and he had access to all that stuff. So I want to say it was after that, maybe, because he was just looking for a place to kind of record. And that setup was really good. So it was either right before that stuff or right after. So I don't know exactly what happened, but that wound up not really getting completed.
So you were never actually in Brian Jonestown, the
No,
band, but what recordings are you involved? Which albums are you kind of so are you on Methadone or which
no,
ones?
I didn't record on any of the albums at all. So
Oh, just those are just like demos or what was that?
so this is all, so what I recall, so like Anton lived in the apartment with us 91, 92 maybe. And he was just recording. I feel like a bunch of that stuff wound up getting on the first album or variations of that. But I don't know for sure. I only played live shows with them, and then I recorded what was going to be an album or was a demo for an album, but nothing got completed with that. That was like 90, no, 95 maybe, right around there.
Okay. Yeah. And uh going back to your apartment, like he lived there with your roommate who was his girlfriend or something, or
Yeah,
what?
so it was Anton and Sally in their flat, their part of the flat, my friend Tom, and then me.
Yeah, because like there was some girlfriend that kind of like supported him like for a couple years there, right?
That could be it. Yeah. I don't, again, I don't know for sure. Like I don't really in that stuff. I just know that, he wasn't working at, oh no, he did some temporary jobs. Like, I think he got me into this too, was, like those research, like they call you in for market research and they pay you like
Yeah.
$100. Like I remember we did a bunch of that stuff.
So we didn't so yeah, so Mara Cagle and Miranda Richards were also like teenagers back then, and they were from San Francisco. They grew up in San Francisco, like so we didn't really talk about Mara like when did you meet her?
I met her probably a month after I recorded Brian Jonestown at my studio with Miranda. Mara was friends with Tim's girlfriend at the time, Lisa, and I met them for breakfast at some breakfast place on Haight Street right before Fillmore. We had breakfast together, chatted. I thought she was really young, whatever. Didn't think about anything for a while. Then I think the following October, I met her at the Smile House, which was it was our friend's place on Waller or Page, whatever's right next to Haight. Bunch of friends of Tim's lived there, and I met Mara there, and then we hit it off, and we wound up dating, and she moved into my place in North Beach, and we lived together for a few years.
Oh,
And then
where did you live in North Beach? Where was that?
Mason and Filbert,
Oh, okay, yeah,
right for that Francis Coppola.
oh yeah, same. Well, up the hill a bit.
No, he had a house.
Oh,
Um,
he lived there too.
yeah, his mom lived in part of it, and he lived there during the week.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. Wait a minute. We're gonna we're running out of time here. I gotta stop this recording and like get to part two here because
Okay.
we're gonna talk about bimbos and Will McCullough and all those guys. Okay, so we're gonna cut. This is part one, and we're gonna talk about. We haven't even got to the Stalwart Lovers yet. So the next part will be mostly Stalwart Lovers. Okay, so like stay tuned. If you want to just hear Stalwart Lovers, go fast forward to part two. Okay, so let me end this one and okay. So I'll send you another link. Okay.